everybody, welcome to Big Balls Fantasy Football, the show with powerful picks, sexy super fans, and that's really fun. I am your host, the guy that's been doing fantasy football since you had to fax your lineup in to the commissioner, Greg Reifstick.
And I'm your co-host, Jenilee Bork. I've been playing fantasy for about 10 years, and we're both Chicago Bears fans as well. This is our little sidekick, Zoe, and together we are the beauty
and the beast
of fantasy football experts.
So we're finally in week 14, and in a lot of your leagues, a lot of your bigger leagues, this is your first week of the playoffs. Hit it, Coach.
Playoffs? You kidding me? Playoffs?
That's right, Mr. Mora. It is playoffs time, and we're actually really excited to be giving you playoff picks this week. We're going to be doing it a little different in our segments. We'll explain it in a moment. But as she said, we're Bears fans, and the reason we're so excited about the playoffs and fantasy is because our team, the Bears, sure as hell isn't going to the playoffs.
Yeah, they absolutely suck. Technically, they're not mathematically out of it yet, but everyone knows the Bears don't have a chance of even going to the playoffs. So, unfortunately, it has been a disappointing, underachieving Bears season for us Bears fans. So, all we have left is fantasy. And if your playoffs aren't starting this week, you probably have to win this week in order to sneak into your playoffs. So It's still a very, very important week in fantasy football.
Yeah, this girl over here kicked my ass this week, and if she wins another week in our league, you're going to sneak into the playoffs in our work league.
Yeah, absolutely. So that'll just depend on win-loss, basically. I might be able to creep into that one. So far, I'm in it for the show league, but I have to hold on for this week as well to stay in it. So, and then my other league, I'm way out of it. So
yeah, right now in the biggest balls of them all league, our show league here, you have Shell, who's just been like, he's the juggernaut going in first place. You have Cash's Cowbears, and you have Prost up in there too. So it's going to be some stiff competition. I'm a little bit too low to make it in. So
yeah, absolutely. And me and Smash are fighting for that fourth spot. So after this week, we will see what happens.
I was doing good for a little while there. I just went on a losing streak.
Yeah, it took a while for a couple of my teams to actually get going. I mean, I had strung like 3 losses in a row together. You know, I didn't think I even had a shot. So the fact that I've gotten some wins all in a row has really helped, and that's just how it goes in fantasy and even in real life football.
It's good to hear you brag instead of complain. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. So, Bears, we couldn't enjoy our Thanksgiving. We spent Thanksgiving together at a friend of hers house. But before that, we watched the game at home because it was the 9:30 early game, and we came out balling in the first quarter, and we were posting about it too.
Oh yeah, it was one of those situations where you're looking at this team at first and saying, who are these guys? You know, what did they give these guys today to play? And because they didn't look like that all season, and then sure enough, you know, within the second quarter actually, it was like, oh yeah, those are the Bears we know from this season. That's the shitty defense we know, and problems offensively, moving the ball again. So we ended up scoring 14 points in the first quarter and only 3 points the entire rest of the game.
And then we let Stafford, Megatron, and everybody else lose their mind. Stafford, 34 of 45, 390 yards, 2 touchdowns. Awesome fantasy day if you had Stafford. Even better if you had Megatron. 11 receptions, 146 yards, 2 touchdowns. He just made Swiss cheese out of our secondary. It was just really pathetic. My favorite one is where he just ran right into the end zone and leapt up over 2 defenders. It was just pretty pathetic.
Yeah, and he was over 100 yards by halftime, you know. I did say it would be a great test for Kyle Fuller, our first rounder from this year. I think Fuller's going to be a very good player. But, you know, it's good for him to go up against someone like Megatron to see how it is to really go up against an absolute dominant wide receiver. Again, we keep having one person, as we talked about in games, a lot of times one person beating us, whether it be Jordy Nelson or Gronkowski, Megatron, just that one player that goes off. And a lot of it's because they're not jamming the receivers at the line at all. They're letting them off the line of scrimmage clean and playing zone.
Yeah, I'm going to get into that further when I talk about my pick. And just to talk about our picks, this week for the playoffs, we're going to do something special. Actually, it was Jenilee's great idea. Why don't you tell them?
We're actually giving you 2 matchups that you need to play, and then 2 matchups that you really might not want to play if you have a better matchup on your bench. So, this is playoffs, or this is the last week to try to get into the playoffs. So we're going to be talking about the stars of teams. I know we've been getting you guys a lot of waiver wire picks through the season and kind of a lot of the players that you don't know as much possibly. But this week we're going to talk about the stars because it's all about the matchups from here on out.
Yeah, we're calling it's go hard, go soft in each of ours. Go hard meaning this is a dream come true matchup for your playoffs. Go soft is, as she said, you might want to second guess yourself. I mean, mine, there's no way you're not going to play either of them, but you're going to have to play them with a lot of caution. But we'll get into that. Should we even go into the Bear stats?
Yeah, I mean, we might as well let everyone know they're definitely not too great. Cutler had 280 yards passing, very mediocre, 2 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. Shocking he didn't fumble. I thought for sure he'd fumble in this game.
Yeah, why not?
But he didn't. But he still threw those 2 interceptions, so he's still consistently turning the ball over.
Yep.
Marshall having a rough year. He had 6 for 42 yards. No touchdowns, not a lot there. Alshon has been a bright spot of the offense.
Yes, he has.
Pretty doggone consistently this season. He went 9 for 71 and had both touchdowns. And Forte, for some reason, we're not running one of the best running backs in the league. He had 5 rushes for only 6 yards. Luckily, if you're in PPR, he had 6 receptions for 52 yards. So that really helped you get some points out of him. But again, we don't really know what Trestman is doing half the time. I was freaking out before halftime when our offense had the ball. Our defense had given up 2 very, very long drives for touchdowns. And even though we were backed up in long yardage because of penalties, another problem, the Bears had 5 penalties for 41 yards, we decide to run the ball on 2nd down and throw a screen on 3rd and long and put our defense back on the field so that the Lions can just march down the field one more time. So it just was not, like we said, a good game. Yeah,
I was saying before we went on the air here, I feel like we're watching John Shoop's offense run. It's just inconsistent. It isn't what happened. What I think are the defensive coordinators figured out Trestman's strategy from last season. So now he's just drawing straws at this point. It's why we need to get rid of him. We need to get rid of Mel Tucker because he's just a joke at this point. It's really horrible. And, we need to get, some value for Jay Cutler and pass him off to another team, which seems dire at this point, but maybe we'll get lucky in the off season because it's either we lose the coach and we keep him and then he has yet another quarterback's coach and offensive coordinator, and we've been through this over and over and over and over again.
At some point you have to realize Cutler is the problem. Unfortunately, he's got 2 years of his guaranteed contract left, money-wise, because it was such a big contract. So unloading that's going to be a problem. And really, I think the biggest problem with Trestman is, there are a lot of times his play calling just doesn't make sense. But the adjustments, the Bears are not making the adjustments. And football, as we know, is a game of adjustments from every down. From every time every cycle you go through on the field, from every quarter, adjustments at halftime, and you need to constantly be making adjustments. And as we saw, that's what Detroit did very well. Our defense stopped them at first. They made some adjustments and started moving the ball. Our offense was moving the ball. Their defense made adjustments and started stopping us. So it's never coming from the Bears' side. The Bears are never making those positive adjustments throughout the game, and that's ultimately why we're losing games.
We're not wearing Bears colors until we win again. Damn it. It's very frustrating. So we're not only going to give you playoff picks. I wanted to kind of briefly go into playoff strategies, and Jenilee and I wanted to each give you our favorite playoff strategy going in. Do you want to start?
Yeah, one of my strategies is, as everyone knows, you absolutely have to play your stars that are consistent every week and that have gotten you there. So you really want to look at your stars that are scoring, double-digit fantasy points most of the time, are consistently targeted in the end zone. That's always something you want to look at. If a player had a couple bad weeks, don't worry about it.
Right.
But you really got to keep an eye on their consistency.
Mm-hmm.
One other strategy I would say is look at the points that you don't always pay attention to, the points from your defense.
Mm-hmm.
If you can switch out a defense that has a better matchup. And even as silly as it sounds, the points from your kicker. If you can go get, because you can always switch out a kicker. And if you think someone's going to be kicking more field goals, that will get you points in fantasy. I had 15 points from my kicker.
I was going to say, who was your insane secret kicker?
The Eagles.
Yeah, last 2 weeks you've gotten double-digit points.
Yeah, and
from your kicker.
Yeah, and again, those are the points that sometimes you don't pay attention to because you're too busy paying attention to the skill position.
Yeah. Mine is kind of that and a little extra. You definitely have to play your stars, but it's the reason why we're doing our play hard, play soft thing is I've been looking at the waiver wire the last few weeks, and that's what we've been telling you to do. And this week in one of my 12-person leagues, it's a winner-go-home game. I have Cutler and I have Roethlisberger in really, really horrible matchups. I might have to not play one of them and actually, go get somebody else off of the waiver wire that has a better matchup, that is a less consistent quarterback, but so I can at least get 30 points or 20 points.
Right.
And, unfortunately, this is the time of year where it's win or go home. You need to put in I always compare it to playing, poker, playing Hold'em poker. You're given 5 cards, you have 2 in your hand, you have to use the 5 best that are out there. But you have to look at everything that's down there out of the 5 cards.
Yeah.
The 5 cards of your waiver wire, this is your lineup that you've been playing the whole time. And you just need to look them all over, and you really got to play the ones that have the good matchups. We'll get to it in our segments. There's just some really crappy matchups going into this week.
Yeah.
It's this week or that's it.
This is a difficult week. There are quite a few division games which end up being pretty doggone difficult a lot of the times. Mm-hmm. And on that note, if you pick someone up and you only need them for this week and, you don't like their matchup next week, that's fine. You can dump them. Or say, someone on your bench has a better matchup. That's why you have your bench there. Mm-hmm. But absolutely, matchups is key. Yep,
and you're playing for this week. That's all you're playing for is this week. You're not playing looking for the next week. You're playing for this week so you can maintain. So we'll get into our segments. Don't forget to watch us on our channel here, youtube.com/BigBallsFootball. Don't forget to go to our website, Big Balls Fantasy Football.
And, of course, like us on Facebook. We do a ton, since we're nearing the end of the season, we do a ton of stuff in the off-season as well. So like us there. It's facebook.com/BigBallsFantasyFootball. And you can tweet us your line of questions for your playoffs at BigBallsFBall.
All right. I think I'm first this week, right?
Yep.
Let's get started. Welcome back to Big Balls Fantasy Football. It's Greg the Beast with not 3, but 4 picks this week for you. Going into the playoffs, as we said in the intro, we're in week 14 of the NFL. We're in week 14 of fantasy, of course. And if you're in a 12-person league, you are for sure having playoffs this week. So what we're doing is we're doing 2 matchups that you can go hard on, be really confident in, and know that the matchup is there. It's a good offensive position, a good offense versus a bad defense, so on and so forth. Or you're going to go soft. You're in a really bad matchup, and you might want to go with a different matchup, find somebody on your waiver wire, or just not rely on them for as many points as you would have hoped. So my first one is Tony Romo and Dez Bryant against the Bears. Yes, diehard Bears fan, not wearing any Bears this week because the Bears are sucking. And boy, oh boy, do we get to have a great game. Dallas up against the Bears on Thursday Night Football. One side note, it's been really nice on Thursdays to watch the Bears on Thursdays and at least suck because then we get to enjoy our Sundays and relax. But anyway, I digress. Romo and Dez Bryant. We talked about in the intro the fact that the Bears on defense have not been jamming any big receivers at the line. Gronk in the Patriots game runs right down, gets big long pass plays. Same thing happened with Megatron last game. Same thing's been happening to all big major receivers. They've just been making Swiss cheese out of our secondary. So Dez Bryant, I predict, of course, is going to do the same. Now, I know Tony Romo, everybody talks about Mr. December, Mr. Non-December, actually, not putting up any fantasy points in December. Well, I think the Bears are going to start them off on the right note and give them some confidence because our defense is just horrible. DeMarco Murray is going to go insane, of course, running as well. So just any of those three players are going to be fantastic. Dez lost his mind against Jacksonville in Week 10 with 34 points in fantasy, 27 against the Giants in Week 12. I see you getting at least 25 to 30 out of Romo minimum, at least 25 to 30 out of Dez Bryant. It's going to be a bloodbath on Thursday. My second go hard pick is Aaron Rodgers and Eddie Lacy against the 23rd ranked, yes, 23rd ranked Falcons defense. And yeah, I know Atlanta has been doing well at their home stadium, but this is in Lambeau. We saw what the Packers did up against the Patriots, and the Patriots have one of the best pass defenses in the game, and he went crazy. The reason that Aaron Rodgers went nuts is he went to Adams, one of his new favorite receivers, Devontae Adams, and went to him early in the game when they were double teaming Jordy Nelson and Randall Cobb. Did that for the first part of the game, and then the second part of the game when they were like, oh crap, wait a minute, Adams is getting all these points, then he was able to open it up to the other two receivers. That's what's exactly going to happen. You're going to be really good at any of your receivers up against this defense. Aaron Rodgers is going to go crazy. Then, of course, you have Eddie Lacy, who has just been mad running all season. He's now surpassed 100 yards from scrimmage in 5 straight games, which has meant bank in fantasy for you. So this matchup is perfect. Play any of the Packers players this week. You're going to be completely safe. So my first go soft this week is Peyton Manning and C.J. Anderson up against the hardcore Bills defense. Now, I've been playing the Bills defense for many weeks now, and they have just been getting me tons and tons of fantasy points. The Broncos didn't have a very good week offensively. They eventually got it going, but early on in the game, Peyton Manning was struggling up against Kansas City. I was watching the game over at the Outpost at Lexi's last stand over there for the season. And this Peyton wasn't looking on point. He's kind of hitting that point of the season where he sometimes gets into his head too much. C.J. Anderson was going crazy, but this is the Bills defense. They have one of the best run defense, is actually one of the top 6 roughest run defenses in the game right now. So they're not going to be able to pound C.J. Anderson. They're going to have to try and go to the outside. And the Bills also have been covering the pass very well too. So I think they might get into Peyton Manning's head. Sure, you're going to get some points out of him. But the point is, up against hard defenses, the Jets, Kansas City, and the St. Louis Rams, he's gotten in the 20s to 30s. Now, as a Peyton Manning owner, as you know, you've gotten used to getting 40s, 50s, sometimes 60 points, getting to just run up against your competition and sit ahead and just pray that they don't have 2 or 3 players that ball out either. You're not going to have that benefit this week because of this matchup. The Bills are tough. I wouldn't sit either of the players, but of course you're just not going to be able to rely on the C.J. Anderson points either. They've given up the second lowest points to running backs this season, the Bills. So just be very cautious with that matchup. My final go soft this week is Big Ben up against the Bengals defense. These two teams have become a rivalry. And for some reason, every time I've seen these two teams play, the Bengals defense plays Ben Roethlisberger hard. And I've been watching with my buddy Phil. He's a huge Steeler fan. I've been catching Steelers games on the Bears off weeks when they haven't played on Sunday. And Ben Roethlisberger has been starting games really, really slow. He doesn't really pick it up until he hits halftime, and then he gets you a bunch of garbage time points. Against the Bengals, he's not going to get you as many garbage time points as you think you're going to get. I don't think it's a good matchup at all. Ben injured his hand in the last game. They're still keeping an eye on that. After he injured his hand, they had to go with the running game and had to really rely on Le'Veon Bell. That's where I think you're going to do okay. I think with Le'Veon Bell, you'll do okay, but you're not going to get the Ben Roethlisberger points this week. And a few of his bad matchups, I've only ended up with like 15 to 20 points in the first half. Actually, sometimes 0 in the first half, and then gotten all the points in the second half. So you're going to have to struggle on that one as well. So those are my 4 Beast Mode picks, special playoff edition this week. And now we're going to go to Jenilee with her Go Hards and Go Softs.
I need a real man. Have you seen him? Thank you, Greg, for those awesome playoff picks. And now we have my real men picks. So it is week 14, like we've been saying. We said it in our intro, and you are either in the playoffs or you are fighting to get in the playoffs. So it is an important week, and these are the matchups you absolutely have to pay attention to. You have to pay attention to your matchups this week. So my first player to go hard with is wide receiver Odell Beckham Jr. of the Giants. He is, of course, the one of the bright spots on the Giants. They don't have many bright spots this season. He is kind of the guy that is keeping hope alive in Giant land. He has had 52 targets in the last 5 weeks, and he has caught 73% of them. So he's not only being targeted a lot, but he's bringing those balls down. Obviously, a couple weeks ago, we saw that amazing one-handed catch. They are playing the Titans in Tennessee, so you shouldn't have to worry about weather too much in this game. But the Titans are giving up the 10th most fantasy points to wide receivers this season. DeAndre Hopkins just absolutely torched them last week for 238 yards and 2 touchdowns. This is going to be a game of just 2 crappy teams going at it, but the Titans defense is really struggling against wide receivers. And Beckham has gotten 90 or more yards every game in the last 5 weeks. So I think he's going to get in the end zone for sure this week. He hasn't been getting a ton of touchdowns in the last 5 weeks. He only has 2. I think he'll get 1 this week, but he's definitely been getting you 90 or more yards. Get him in your lineup. This is a great matchup. My second go hard pick for this week's matchups is quarterback Ryan Tannehill of the Dolphins. Yes, Ryan Tannehill. He's typically a guy that's not going to be on fantasy radars, but he has been doing pretty doggone good this season. He's had some pretty impressive numbers, definitely his best season that he's had thus far. He has had 20 touchdowns so far and only 9 interceptions this season. That is a great ratio. My goodness, Cutler definitely hasn't been doing that, but Tannehill's been getting it done. They are playing at home versus the Ravens this week, and the Ravens have the 31st defense against the pass. They are terrible against the pass. The Ravens have given up 13 passing touchdowns in the last 4 weeks that they've played. Of course, they had their bye week, week 11, so it's actually 13 touchdowns in 5 weeks, but one of those weeks they weren't on the field. So they are giving up a lot of touchdowns through the air. And this is an important game for both teams. Both teams are fighting for a wild card spot in the playoffs. Both teams are trying to get in the playoffs. So this is an important one. I think that Tannehill is absolutely going to use Mike Wallace a lot, so get him in your lineup. And I absolutely think that he's going to throw. He could throw for possibly 300 yards. He also has the threat of running the ball. He's run for over 200 yards this season, and I think he's going to get you 2 to 3 touchdowns. So if you have a bad matchup for one of your other quarterbacks, he might be out there on some waiver wires, and you might need to just start him if you usually bench him. So now let's move it on. I have my go soft picks. These are guys to watch out for because I don't think they're going to be getting you very many fantasy points this week, and they might possibly be even guys to sit if you have better guys on your bench with better matchups. So my first go soft this week is running back Alfred Morris. He is a very different running back when RG3 is the starting quarterback versus when RG3 is not the starting quarterback, because with RG3, there's always the threat of RG3 pulling it down and running himself. Right now, teams are just stacking 8 in the box against Alfred Morris, and he's not doing a whole lot, so you definitely have to keep that in mind. The Rams is who they're playing this week, and the Rams have improved a lot in their run defense. In Week 10, they only gave up 23 rushing yards. Week 11, they gave up 29 rushing yards. Week 12, they slumped a little bit against the Chargers. They gave up 112 rushing yards. But then again, last week in Week 13, they only gave up 60 rushing yards, and that was with 3 different running backs running the ball. So they have really clamped down on that run, and it is not going to be easy for Morris to get going. And he has only had 1 100-yard game this season. Really, that is not impressive considering what he's done in the past. So this is a matchup that I think is going to be tough for them. Do not look for him to get over 100 yards. I don't think at all. You'll be lucky if he gets a touchdown. I don't even know if that'll happen. And the Redskins also use Roy Halou Jr. in the passing game, so that takes away from your PPR points with Alfred Morris. So he might be a guy that you actually need to bench this week. My last go soft pick is tight end Greg Olsen of the Panthers. Yes, he is one of the best tight ends in the game, but he has a difficult matchup against the Saints, and it is in New Orleans, which doesn't make it any easier. Week 9 versus the Saints, he only had 3 receptions for 30 yards and 0 touchdowns. So he did absolutely nothing against the Saints when they played at home. And he actually has not had a touchdown since week 6. I was looking at his stats a little bit, and I was very surprised to see that. So Carolina's offense is obviously struggling, and Olsen isn't getting in the end zone, or hasn't at least since week 6. The Saints are giving up the second fewest fantasy points to tight ends, so they are clamping down on that middle of the field area. The Saints defense isn't great, but they are doing very well against tight ends. And the Panthers offense, like I said, is struggling. They're only 19th in offense in passing, and they're 21st overall in the league in offense. So Cam Newton's not getting it done. There's just not a lot of positives coming out of that Carolina offense. And the Saints are fighting with Atlanta to win the division. Obviously, only one team is going to come out of that division and be in the playoffs this year. So the Saints have something to really play for. This is a big, important game for them. Division game. Panthers are already out of it, so they really don't have a lot to look forward to. So there you go. Those are my go hards, go softs. If you got better people on your bench, put those better people in. Play the good matchups. If there's someone sitting out there on the waiver wire that's looked impressive lately, go ahead and grab them. So that wraps up our show for tonight, you guys. Hopefully you guys will have some playoff questions for us next week. Of course, we gave our Facebook and Twitter at the beginning of the show, but it's facebook.com/BigBallsFantasyFootball, and our Twitter is @BigBallsFBall. So get us your questions so that we can help you choose who to play so that you win your fantasy this year. And that's all we have for you, so good night.